So the one that fascinated me the most is a story about a hanging there. And I found out that the owner of the Tempest, when it was the Magnus, when the hanging happened, was Chris Berg, who also owns the Weary Traveler in town. So it is a very hard job that I have coming around to these fine eating and drinking establishments asking about ghost stories. So I'm chatting with Chris and I'm like, hey, I hear the Tempest is haunted. He goes, no, but you want to know what's really haunted? Is the building that used to be the Blue Marlin. And I'm like, tell me. So he did. But we'll start back in the beginning of this building. In the 1898, 1899, 1900, this was a butcher shop. It was owned by Madison Mayor Hovde. He was a three-term mayor and a butcher because you were both back in the day then. The window was flipped. You can see the picture up there of how it originally looked. And that's him standing in the doorway. What they used to do, which I personally find horrifying, is hang meat in the window for people to walk by and inspect and buy. I like to be more removed from my meat. That just grosses me out. About 1940s, this place was still a butcher shop, and he sold it to three German brothers, the Draper brothers. So it was a Draper Brothers butcher shop, and about late 30s, 40s, these German immigrants were having quite a hard time being here because there was a lot of anti-German immigrant issues going on at that time because of the war. So they got harassed quite a bit. So one of the three brothers wound up hanging himself in a tree that used to be behind this place here. Granted, we have these high rises now, but back then this was one of the tallest buildings on the block. So very, very tragic. Fast forward to the 1980s when Chris Berg and his two business partners bought this place to make it the Blue Marlin, which was a fantastic seafood restaurant for about 20 years, just about, I think. So, back to Chris. So I say, well, what's so haunted about here? And he goes, okay, so when we were building it out to be the Blue Marlin, they had a beautiful sign in the front window of the Blue Marlin. The painting, he was with one of the other owners, and they had what sounds like an old guy painting it, older gentleman. His name was Mr. Rossetti. So Mr. Rossetti's painting it right about where you're standing. Chris is standing here with another partner, chatting with Mr. Rossetti about the great work he's doing on the window. And suddenly, Mr. Rossetti stops. And he just says, before this place opens, all of you, or one of the three of you, will die. So Chris is like, Mr. Rossetti, are you okay? Mr. Rossetti shakes his head a little bit. And then he goes, what? He goes, you don't like the color? So Mr. Rossetti went into a trance, witnessed by Chris, and had no idea what he just said. Meanwhile, Chris is nervous. There are two other owners and him, and I would say he's a bit superstitious, and he's like, oh my God, one of us is going to die. Someone's going to die before this place opens. And sure enough, somebody did. It was one of the construction workers had a heart attack. So he looked up the history of the building and found out about the three Draper brothers. Now, every time I talk to Chris at the Weary, he's a very busy man. When he was telling me the story, he sort of went back and forth between saying when they were opening it in the 1980s and saying, well, when it was a butcher shop and we were opening it, and I'm like, did he know he was doing that? Granted, this is a restaurant owner and his restaurant's picking up speed and he feels the need to work. Now, the next story he told me was while they were building this out, he had one of his friends who did construction work help clean up afterwards. So his friend, a gentleman, was upstairs cleaning up debris, construction stuff, and right up there he said he saw a full-blown apparition. It scared the guy so much he just came running down and left and didn't come back in the building. Chris swears this place is haunted. He also pointed out something very interesting. The only two places they saw something was within 10 feet apart. Right down there where Mr. Rossetti had his trance, and directly above him is where the apparition showed up. So, I was fortunate enough to meet Josh last year when it was closed, the owner, so we're very grateful to Josh and Tyler. There's Josh. And Tyler, our awesome bartender. So this is one of my keystone stories for next year, this whole corner. I hope to see you next year, and I hope to see you much, much sooner before that. So those of you who have been with me before, I'll have a tour for you.
Awesome.